Hey, I'm DC Wright-Hammer. This is Writers Row, and I have a special guest who's making another appearance on the show. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, DC Wright-Hammer, for bringing me back. So I think we're here to talk about the business of becoming a editor and whether or not indie authors should become an editor. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to just once again plug Gaia Awakens, the Climate Crisis Anthology. If you saw the episode from a few weeks ago or days, depending on when you air these. Encourage you to check it out, whether you're a reader who's interested in climate fiction or if you're an author who is interested in climate fiction, because we'll have another round of open submissions. It's an anthology of science fantasy, climate fiction centered on Earth, but it's all in the same universe. Really cool collaborative writing project.
There'll be a link in the description down below for that if you want to pre-order. You'll probably still be able to pre-order that by the time this airs. Regardless, what CD mentioned, so he writes, he's an indie author, plus an editor, I guess, is that part-time editor? Is that what you would describe it as?
Yes.
And I know, so as indie authors, it's tough, right? You write these books, you put them out there, you try to sell them, but I felt the need, and I've seen others feel the need. They want to do more in the community. They want to do more in the writing realm. And so they start to take on other tasks, other projects, other lines of work. And in some cases, it's to, if they want to be a full-time writer, maybe they're doing editing part-time, writing part-time. That's sort of their full-time writing gig. But I wanted to bring you on and kind of talk about this side of it because, if you truly just want to be a writer, let me just ask the question. So why did you become an editor on top of just being an indie author? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So to give you a little bit of background, so my day job, I'm an attorney. So I already do a ton of writing and editing for my day work. So I went through law school, got my undergraduate's in philosophy and English, and so like all of my writing experience and education is all centered around those educational roots. But I wouldn't say that anyone is ever necessarily, you don't know if you're going to be a good editor until you try it, really. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I decided to explore it was, one, I was like, okay, I know I want to be publishing, so maybe editing would be a good way to help fund that, because my income as an attorney is how we live. That was the question I was asking. But also I was like, I don't want to be so arrogant as to think that I'm going to be a good editor. So what I did was actually I got 2 manuscripts from 2 authors and just edited them for free. They fully understood that I was not a professional editor. I was doing this for the experience and learning process. And through that, I learned that I liked it and that I was pretty decent at it. Both of them thought I did a very good job on those projects. So the reason why I dove into it was, one, to be able to help fund my publishing, but also because I liked it. But we can talk about this a little bit later. I do not think you should do this if you do not like editing.
Got it.
Don't think of it as a way for like easy cash, because if you don't like editing, you're not going to be a good editor.
Right. And we will dive into that because I think that's really important. But I guess since you are a writer and an editor, how do you balance the two, right? How do you make time to write, make time to edit? It's, most of us, like you do, have a day job as well. How do you balance that?
Probably not well, to be honest.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not doing as much freelance editing right now as I have done in the past. I did have 2 clients over the summer. Over the past few months, most of my editing has been focused on the Climate Crisis Anthology, working with all the authors on those stories. And honestly, my long-term trajectory for what I want to do for editing is probably more focused on publishing like those sorts of collaborative works where I'm working with people to publish something under my LLC's, the publishing company that I run. But to answer your question specifically, it turned into, like, especially at the beginning when I was doing editing for really low pay, or before that when I was doing free editing to see if I liked it and whether I was good at it, It was literally like probably like a month straight of like 12 to 15-hour days.
Got it.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like very much balance. But that's what I kind of considered, what I kind of thought, because, I started off being an indie author, and suddenly I'm making YouTube videos. And, it sort of, in some cases, scratches the same itch, right? Like, I want to do something creative. I want to do something related to writing, but I don't feel like actually doing writing. And so, and one of the things that I am learning more and more as time goes on is that that's okay. Like, it's okay to not just be hyper focused on a thing. And if just be clear with yourself what your intentions are, like really analyze your behavior, because what I started the YouTube channel because I did want to network and I wanted to learn and I wanted to, and now that became my passion for a while. I know I took a hiatus for a year, but I loved working with authors and talking writing more than I liked actually writing. And that was a struggle for me for a good year because, oh, does that, I started questioning, am I really a writer? Then all these kind of, writer existential questions. And so I guess, like, have you struggled with any of that taking on? And you said you have a publishing company, you're doing editing, you're doing all this stuff. Like, has it changed your definition of yourself as a writer as you go along?
Yes. Maybe I think the thing that editing has done for me is make me more confident in my writing, but also sometimes it actually makes me really recognize where I'm falling short in my writing. Okay. I actually think so. I feel like any of us who are writers who actually end up having the confidence to publish something do think we are good writers. So I do think I am a good writer. Sure. However, I actually do think in some instances I can be a better editor, because it's a lot easier to look at something that you didn't create, that you didn't spend time forming, and recognize the ways that it can improve or the ways that it's good, to be honest. And I've worked with some authors that I have done a really good job, I feel, of providing them with the editing that they want. The thing that I do the most of is line editing, and that's a lot of pattern recognition, to be honest. You know the grammar rules, you know the style rules, you identify the ways that people maybe overusing certain phrases, help them eliminate passive voice in certain instances, just identify ways that the prose itself can, shift in ways that they may like to make their words stronger. But all throughout the process of doing that, I feel like I've learned so much from some really incredible authors. And so that's like what I would take from it, is that like editing has really made me become a better writer. And in some instances, that's just helping me notice when I'm doing things that aren't good writing.
Well, and so I think that leads to the next question. Do you still use professional editors for your work?
Yes. I'm not going to tell people which stories, but there are some stories that I have released just by editing myself and then hiring a proofreader. At the very minimum, I think every story I have has been at least proofread. And also, I would say I have always had stories looked at by someone before I publish it. And in the sense of whether that's one or two beta readers or a critique partner, I think it is really, really important that you have people give you a gut check on the way your narrative is going. When it comes to refining the language itself, though, I feel confident enough in the way that my editing skills go to get that narrowed down. I don't hire a line editor. I don't hire a developmental editor unless I have someone tell me that like you really need to work on where the story is going.
Got it. Yep.
So yeah.
Well, and because I think that's sort of a misconception. If I become an editor, then I never need to hire an editor. And
absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. Just you could wear both hats, but when it comes to making sure your work is as good as it can be, nothing substitutes for another set of good eyes.
Yes. And I would say, and also proofreading, like honestly, like I've had enough stories go out where even after a proofreader, there's still some typos slipping through.
Right.
That proofreading is absolutely essential because your eyes are so used to the words on your page that you are going to miss something.
Well, and I don't want people to misconstrue that as you need to shell out a ton of money either. You should pay people what they're worth. Like, you should pay good money for good work. But that doesn't mean you have to shell out thousands of dollars or anything like that. And in some cases, you can find people willing to volunteer who are good, for, if they're like you were doing free editing for a little while, or, people, there are some low priced options that are out there. You just have to look for them. You have to network and things like that. I am for paying people if you're able to, and so on and so forth. But absolutely get edited, because even when you're edited, I think in my first novel I found 33 things I wish I could change. But I think that's something important. Don't misperceive becoming an editor with not needing an editor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if people wanted to get into editing and add that to their sort of resume as a writer, what do you think the best way to do that is? Is it similar to the path you took, or are there any lessons learned that you can share?
Yeah. So you were talking about, ensuring that people are being paid for the work they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people often forget that there are multiple ways to pay people. And yeah. I would say one of the best ways to get into editing would actually be to spend a lot of time really doing a lot of intentional. One way to do this would be manuscript swapping with another author. Now, I just volunteered my time to 2 authors and did that because I was like, I want to get into freelance editing. This will be the best crash course. I've done a lot of editing in my day job and in my educational career, and this will be the best way to really apply that. And specifically, it's the line editing and proofreading approach to editing that I dove into. But there's a lot of ways to do. You don't have to volunteer your time for 2 books. You could find another author who maybe is interested in the same thing, and you can swap each other's manuscripts and learn from it. You both do a full edit. You could do multiple passes on each other's manuscripts. You could do a developmental edit, and then you could do a line edit on each other's manuscripts and really learn that way, and do that multiple times to get yourself trained up, because then you're both benefiting from that sort of transaction. And other ways that you could do that is, maybe there's an author who's also a cover designer, and you could volunteer to be like, hey, I'll do a full, really in-depth critique or developmental edit or whatever of their book. Now, I think the important thing to be clear is that when you are a new editor, if you're not being paid yet for your services, or you don't feel confident enough in how the value of your editing skills, make sure you're being transparent with who you're working with. Mm-hmm. Do not advertise yourself as an editor if you do not yet have truly the skills to be an editor, because too many authors have been burned by people who aren't actually good at what they do.
Sure.
And there will be people who charge thousands of dollars who aren't good editors. There are people who charge thousands of dollars who are really good editors. Right. There'll be people who charge not a lot of money and are really fantastic editors. Right. Just know who you're working with, and make sure you're advertising yourself the way you want to be advertised, and that you're credible in the way you're advertising yourself.
Well, and I think you should seek out, if you're trying to edit other people's work, you should seek out people who are open to that kind of relationship. Like, if you're trying to do that for pro bono or whatever you're trying to do, because the last thing you want is to edit their work and they're like, well, I'm not paying you anyway, so I don't care about your opinion. And that would not be good. So you do want to sort of be discerning in the type of person you choose to edit for. Someone you have a decent relationship with, and they understand, like, you're doing them a favor to do the editing. They'll do you a favor by maybe referring you to other people, helping you build your confidence as an editor and things like that. And so it is a two-way street in that sense. I'd hate for people to get into editing and get burned by finding, just picking any manuscript under the sun by any writer. That writer ends up being a jerk, and no, they don't want to be an editor anymore. Well, yeah, you really do need to have a good two-way relationship there.
And the way that I started getting myself paid for my work was, I probably leaned a little too hard into this because I have a bleeding heart. My job as an attorney is in the nonprofit sector. I'm very much Like I think it's really important that once you are worth a certain value of your labor, you need to be valuing yourself at that level. But what I did was I advertised. I was like, hey, if you book with me to do an edit in this month, then it will be $1 per 1,000 words, or $10 per 10,000 words. And I had no limit on that. And so I ended up booking manuscripts with authors for the entire year at that rate. So my first year of editing, I did not make a lot of money. However, a lot of those authors turned into returning clients who then paid me at full rates afterward with second or third books. And because what I did was I proved to those people, you paid me $100 for an edit, and they thought this was a really good job, and then they paid me full price later. And so that is one strategy to consider too, because then it's less of an investment for someone, but it is still an investment. They buy in on you and they understand, oh, this person is just opening their editing freelance work, and maybe I'll get a really good edit out of this, but if not, oh, you know, I didn't spend that much money and I'll have gotten something out of it. And so that's one strategy people can consider. I would encourage you to make sure you cap yourself though, because I love all the authors that I worked with over the course of that year, but that was a lot of work.
Hey, appreciate you coming on and talking about this, CD. I think we've all learned quite a bit. Go ahead and pitch Gaia Awakens again. I think that's definitely worthy, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Gaia Awakens, a climate crisis anthology. The link should be in the description. It is coming out, I believe our release date is November 9th. And it's got 16 authors in it. And if you're in the writing community on Twitter, you might recognize some of the names. Some of them are new, might be new to you. A lot of them were new to me. It was great to do an open submission process. I would encourage you, if you're a fan of climate fiction or dystopian fiction or science fantasy, it's going to be a lot of fun as a reader. But also, if you're a writer, stay tuned. We're going to have another open window of submissions for future stories at some point in the future. And I want as many people as possible writing climate fiction. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Thanks again, CD. And thanks everyone who's watched this long. We'll catch you all next time.